Welcome back, my menopause students. It's so good that you're here today. I'm Menopause Taylor, your gynecologic professor, and today I'm going to teach you about something that only a gynecologist professor can teach you. This is video number 487. It's part of our unit on genital symptoms of menopause. And in order to understand your genital symptoms of menopause, you have to understand why you don't have any genital symptoms until menopause. In other words, you have to understand the state of affairs before you lose your estradiol. So today we will start our discussion of just your vagina. And I'll teach you about the normal state of affairs in your vagina before you lose your estradiol. Now, if you haven't already guessed, all of the normal aspects of your vagina are due to one thing, and one thing only: estradiol. So get used to everything about your vagina boiling down to estradiol. Now, in my book, you'll find this material in chapter 22, but the presentation I give here will be in a different format and a bit more creative. I want to start by clarifying one very basic and very critical thing. Where your vagina begins and where your vagina ends. I know this sounds very elementary, but you would be surprised. I have heard people use the word vagina to refer to everything around the vagina, next to the vagina, beyond the vagina, etc., etc. This kind of generalization and extrapolation will get you nowhere. Your vagina is a very specific and very limited structure. Externally, you can see only the opening to your vagina. It's here. But that's only about 1% of your vagina. None of the other stuff out here in this general area is your vagina. None of this is your vagina, just in here. So on this model, the opening of your vagina is here. The other 99% of your vagina is all in here. So the opening is here, and the rest of it is internal. You cannot see it. And it consists of this tubular structure here, this tube. So your vagina is but a tube. And while it's much more complex than it appears here, it does not include any of the other structures nearby. So if you're in the bad habit of using the term vagina to label anything other than this tube, break that bad habit. Everybody will misinterpret you if you continue that bad habit. So, let's get started. You know that I like to simplify things. And the reason I love to simplify things is that you can better utilize the information if it's simple. Simply put, simple information is easy to use. And complex information is difficult to use. So I'm going to explain the normal state of affairs of your vagina by simplifying it to just 3 factors: the climate, the architecture, and the inhabitants. It's just like the real world. There's an overall climate. There's an architecture of the buildings in that climate. And there are living creatures that inhabit the building. These 3 factors dictate everything about your vagina. And these 3 factors have typical characteristics that create the normal state of affairs for your vagina. And these three same factors are the very things that change in the absence of estradiol. So we will address the normal state of affairs for your vagina today. And then we'll tackle the abnormal state of affairs for your vagina in subsequent videos. And we'll chart the normal state of vaginal affairs at the end of this tutorial. And that way we can add to our chart in future tutorials when we get to the abnormal state of affairs. So let's address the three factors one at a time. Starting with climate. Now, when you hear the word climate, you tend to think of weather conditions, don't you? You think in terms of temperature, hot versus cold, and you think in terms of humidity, wet versus dry. Well, it turns out that your vagina has a weather report too. It's a vaginal weather report. Now, your vagina doesn't respond to the actual climactic elements that constitute climactic conditions in the real world, such as cold or rain or sun. But your vagina does have its own version of both temperature and humidity. Your vagina's temperature gauge is a matter of the acid-base balance in your vagina. So your normal vagina doesn't experience a range of seasons. Instead, it has a range of normal pH values. pH values pertain to how acidic or how basic the environment is. Low pH values are acidic. They are consistent with a warm vaginal climate. High pH values are basic. They are consistent with a cool vaginal climate. And the entire scale of pH values uses water as the middle of the range. So water has what we call a neutral pH, and the neutral pH of water is 7.0. So we measure the climate of your vagina in terms of how it compares with the pH of water. pH values below 7 are acidic. pH values above 7 are basic. But just because the neutral pH value of 7 is considered neutral does not mean that a pH value of 7 is normal. The normal pH of anything depends on the specific environment. And when it comes to the environment of your vagina, a normal pH value is between 3.8 and 4.5. So the normal pH of your vagina is acidic. It's warm. Think a minute. If your vaginal climate is acidic, there must be something in your vagina making it acidic. What might that be? Well, it's an acid, of course, and it's called lactic acid. Your normal vagina produces a bunch of lactic acid, making the whole environment of your normal vagina acidic. And to what do we owe this normal acidic pH range of 3.8 to 4.5? Estradiol. You can thank the presence of estradiol for your normal vaginal pH. This is akin to living in a place where the overall temperature is on the warm side. So, on this globe, we can just designate the geographic climate of your vagina as being somewhere here near the equator. Oops, like that. That's where it's warm. Now, in addition to the pH, your vagina has another climactic gauge that refers to humidity. In other words, how wet or dry is your vagina? And your normal vagina is very wet. You already know that your normal vagina produces secretions that keep it well lubricated. So the climate in your normal vagina is quite humid indeed. And to what do we owe this normal, wet, humid vaginal climate? Estradiol. You can thank the presence of estradiol for your wet, humid, normal vagina. So, the overall climate of your vagina consists of a pH of 3.8 to 4.5 and very high humidity. It's wet and warm. Now, our second factor is architecture. You know how the architecture of buildings differs in various regions of the world? Well, the same is true of the architecture of skin in various parts of your body. And your vagina just happens to be a tube of skin. That's right, skin. It's just that it's an inner skin surface rather than an outer skin surface. The fact that it's an inner skin surface is the very reason that it has its own climate. Well, architecture refers to how something is built. It has to do with the kind of walls that form the structure and things like that. Architecture is what gives a building its character. It's what dictates a building's function. A building, using the houses of the three bears here, a building with thick walls like the brick walls of the first little pig may serve a different function than a building with thin walls like these stick walls of the second little pig. A building with murals on the walls may serve a different function than a building with shelves on the walls. Well, the architecture of your vagina serves a purpose. It has a unique architecture, and that architecture dictates its function. And to what do we owe this normal vaginal architecture? Estradiol. You can thank the presence of estradiol for your normal vaginal architecture. When it comes to your vagina, the architectural features that define it as a vagina are the thickness of its walls and what's on its walls. So let's discuss each of these. We'll start with the thickness of your vaginal walls. Now, knowing that your vagina has to function as a vagina, would you expect it to have thick walls or thin walls? My goodness, just think of all the activity that goes on in a vagina. I mean, there's probing and pounding and stretching galore. It has to have thick walls. In fact, your vaginal walls consist of 7 layers. 3 layers lie beneath the skin layers, and then there are 4 layers that are skin layers on top of that. The lowermost layer is connective tissue. Connective tissue houses the blood vessels and nerves that supply your vagina. This is what we'll use to represent our lowermost connective tissue layer. It's actually a slab of marble. These red squiggles are blood vessels, and the white squiggles are nerves. So the nerves to your vagina are deeply buried in this lowermost of the 7 layers. So let's build a vaginal wall, starting with this piece of marble as the lowermost layer. Okay? On top of this connective tissue, you have muscle, but you actually have 2 layers of muscle instead of just 1. One layer of muscle runs lengthwise, so it's long. The other layer of muscle encircles your vagina. So obviously, the muscle that runs lengthwise enables your vagina to lengthen and shorten, while the circular muscle enables your vagina to open, to expand, or close to contract. So now we're putting those on top of our connective tissue. We have connective tissue and we have muscle. Well, on top of the muscle layers, there's something called the lamina propria. The lamina propria consists of collagen and elastin cells that enable your vagina to tolerate trauma and to stretch. So the collagen is like this thick, thick cushion. And the elastin is like this thick, thick elastic. So now I'm putting those on top. And then, on top of the connective tissue, muscle, and lamina propria, you have vaginal skin. Now, you have skin all over your body. And while the details of the skin differ in different locations, the basic principles of skin are the same everywhere. The first principle is that skin is a protective covering. The second principle is that skin is always replacing itself. It's like a conveyor belt. New skin cells take the place of old skin cells. So skin is always turning over. The lowermost layers of skin produce the new skin cells, and then these new skin cells work their way up through all of the other layers to the top layer of skin. And eventually those new skin cells compose the oldest skin cells and they slough off. All skin functions in this manner, and your vaginal skin is no different. You can think of this constant turnover of skin as a form of maturation. And it's kind of like the process of aging. For your vagina, we call it vaginal maturation. So let's address these 4 layers of vaginal skin. On top of this vaginal lamina propria that we already have here, you have the 4 layers of skin. The lowermost layer of skin consists of something called basal cells. It's just one row of cells, a nice thin row of cells. So we'll put that there. Basal cells produce the new skin cells to replace the old skin cells. On top of the basal layer, there's a layer of inhabasal cells. But the layer of para-basal cells is thicker. It's 2 to 5 rows of cells. So it's a semi-thick layer of skin cells that stays only 2 to 5 rows thick, all because of estradiol. On top of the parabasal cells, there's an intermediate layer of cells. The intermediate layer of cells is the thickest layer of skin cells. It gives your vagina its basic tubular form. And finally, on the very top, forming the surface of your vagina that you can see on pelvic exam, is the layer of superficial cells. The superficial layer functions as a protective layer. As you can see, your vaginal wall consists of quite a lot of layers that form an extremely thick wall. This is like a super duper layered sandwich. But wait, that's not all. Earlier, I told you that the architectural features that define your vagina as a vagina are the thickness of its walls, but also what's on the walls. So what's on your vaginal walls? And how can what's on the walls be so important that it affects the very function of your normal vagina? Well, you see, this is the rub. Thick walls are great. Thick walls make it possible for your vagina to withstand all sorts of activity. But your normal vagina has another feature that makes it even tougher than it is with just its thick walls. Those thick walls are wrinkled. That's right. They are wrinkled. I'm going to use this to represent your vaginal wrinkles. The medical term for wrinkled walls is rugae. But I mean, who needs a medical term for wrinkles? I mean, wrinkles are wrinkles. And while you do not want wrinkles on your face, you do want wrinkles in your vagina. Now, while I've placed these wrinkles just on this top layer of the wall of our vaginal layers, in reality, the wrinkles make your vaginal walls even thicker than I've made ours here. And that's because rather than just this one layer being wrinkled, all 7 layers are wrinkled. The already thick vaginal walls are folded such that they are really double or triple thick. And to what do we owe these vaginal wrinkles? Estradiol. You can thank the presence of estradiol for all your normal vaginal wrinkles. So your vaginal walls are quite a lot like an accordion. All these folds of an accordion can move and accommodate whatever activity is taking place in your vagina. That's why your vagina can do so many different things. It can stretch. It can contract. It can withstand friction. It can heal from trauma. I mean, talk about tough. You know, I'll never understand why people say, get some balls when they're telling someone to be tough. What they should say is, get a vagina. Balls are weak and sensitive. A vagina is tough. A vagina can take a beating. Balls cannot. So your normal vagina looks like this. It is a great big bunch of wrinkles around the skin tube, and it's got a bunch of lubricated skin on it. So when it comes to the architecture of your vagina, it consists of a very thick wall that is very wrinkled, all thanks to estradiol. Now, our third factor is inhabitants. Now, this refers to what lives in your normal vagina. In other words, the microbiota. Microbiota refers to the organisms that inhabit a particular environment. People talk a lot about the microbiome these days. The problem is that they fail to specify which microbiome. A microbiome implies a specific location. So you have a gut microbiome, a mouth microbiome, and a vaginal microbiome, but they are not all the same. Each one is unique. I can assure you that your vagina has a much cleaner microbiome than either your mouth or your gut. So for each unique location, there is a unique microbiota or family of inhabitants. It's just like the different families that live in the different houses on a street. They all live on the same street. So the street would be the microbiome, but each house on the street houses a different family. And the family members living in each house constitute the microbiota. Some microbiomes have many microbiota. In other words, they have a variety of microorganisms living in the same environment. Other microbiomes have very few microbiota. So they have only one or two kinds of microorganisms living in the environment. Well, your vagina is very prejudicial. The microbiota of your normal anatomy is very, very limited. It consists of primarily just one kind of microorganism. And it's the only microorganism your vagina considers healthy. It's lactobacilli. So for purposes of the inhabitants of your normal vagina, the more lactobacilli you have, the better. And to what do we owe these lactobacilli? Estradiol. You can thank the presence of estradiol for your normal vaginal lactobacilli-dominated inhabitants. Now focus a bit on the name of these microorganisms that inhabit your vagina. Lactobacilli. That word sounds a lot like the word we used to account for the acidic pH of your vagina, doesn't it? Lactic acid, lactobacilli. Aha! They sound the same for a reason. It is the lactobacilli that produce the lactic acid. Lactobacilli dominate your normal vagina and produce gobs and gobs of lactic acid, making the whole place acidic. You see how it all comes full circle? And your vagina does a really good job of keeping out all the microorganisms that it doesn't want around. It's a very self-governing, self-cleaning, and discriminating contaminating environment. One of the ways in which your vagina limits its real estate to lactobacilli only is by producing the perfect food for lactobacilli. Lactobacilli in your vagina just love glycogen. So your vagina produces loads and loads of glycogen, which increases the number of lactobacilli, which produce gobs and gobs of lactic acid, and they keep your vagina happy. So both the lactobacilli and the glycogen are due to estradiol. So, in your normal model of a vagina here, we'll place a whole bunch of one kind of microorganism. One kind only, they're all the same. One kind of organism in the whole place, no others. They all are the same. They're just in there by the gazillions, and they're all like a bunch of clones of each other, okay? So you have a basic bunch of clones, all lactobacilli. There's no variety in your vaginal house. Well, now that we've addressed all three factors, we can create our chart to reflect all three of them, right? So you can see that in the first column, I've simply listed our three factors. In the second column, I've designated the specific parameters of each factor. And in the third column, I've listed the details for your normal vagina. If you want this chart, you can find it just below this screen in the description box, or you can go to menopausetailor.me, where you can also schedule a consultation with me to discuss your vagina. The chart is your summary for today. And I hope you'll remember my props. I make the props so that you'll have a mental picture of what you've learned in each video. The bottom line for your vagina is this. It has a climate that is warm and wet. It has an architecture that makes its walls very thick and wrinkled. And it has only one kind of inhabitant that keeps it healthy. Well, it will be no surprise to discover that next week's video will entail what happens to your normal vagina when you lose your estradiol at the time of menopause. You know that every tutorial in this education is a foundation for the next. Please become an official member of this menopause community by subscribing to my YouTube channel and newsletter. You'll learn about special promotions and giveaways from the newsletter. And following me on social media doesn't give you official status, but you might find some fun things there anyway. And you'll also be able to participate in any special events via social media. Please come back next week to discover all the changes that occur in your normal vagina to make it abnormal at the time of menopause. And don't fret. You know I will ultimately tell you everything about how to avoid all the stuff you don't want. That's it for now, my dears. Bye!